I'm on. And you're on.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pod TV's #1 investing show, Wall Street Hackers with Peter Bennett.
Hey.
And just to give you a little bit of introduction about Peter, Peter received his BA in economics at UCLA, his law degree from the University of Miami, and an MBA in finance from NYU, where he continued to work in Wall Street. Now he takes his time and doing more research in investing, and he's here to give you some tips and share tips on how to invest during this economic storm that we're trying to survive. I mean, this has been very scary. I don't think I've been this nervous in many years. So, Peter, thank you so much for doing this for us.
Oh, thanks. And that storm is something I've been predicting a long time, and I'm afraid it could get worse. But I have a sort of different opinion we'll throw out there today. So welcome, audience. You can catch a new Wall Street Hackers most weeks, Thursdays or Saturdays, depending on your distribution network. So the markets. Well, the market is starting to wake up from its totally delusional state. It's been saying, I don't know, for a year and a half, it's definitely a soft landing. The Fed is going to lower rates. It was going to lower rates in the summer, and it was going to lower rates in the fall, and then it was going to lower rates next year. Now it's starting to realize that it's a hard battle against inflation. And history shows that a lot of times it takes 10 years to fight inflation. As a matter of fact, the study of 16 countries showed that it took 10 years. And I don't even know if it was one event or whatever, but it took 10 years to fight inflation in 16 countries. So the market is changing. And here's the thing. The short-term rates were up a lot, but now the long-term rates are up. And this is going to create much more competition for the stock market. You can now get 4.7% on the 10-year, maybe around the same on the 30-year. So somebody might say, you know what? If I can get 4.7%, maybe in my IRA, my Roth IRA, where I love bonds, particularly in my Roth IRA. But if I get 4.7, that's guaranteed money. Maybe it loses against inflation, maybe it wins. But the stock market, I believe in stocks, but it's a good part of your portfolio. So, sorry, I said that wrong. Bonds can now be a good part of your portfolio. So there's competition for the first time. Now, Jeffrey Gundlach, who isn't always right, and he's just one of those Wall Street hedge guys or fun guys, but he said that he believes last year stocks were a much better value. He said twice the value. I don't know how he measures, but he said he believes stocks were twice the value of bonds a year ago. Now he said bonds are actually twice the value of stocks based on his parameters. So I don't know about twice the value, but I do know there's a lot more value in bonds, which is obvious when you can get these kind of rates short and long term now. And also that there's more and more competition and people are getting nervous. Now, the other reasons why rates are, and the problem is rates are still going to remain high. I have a new theory that maybe they won't go up a lot more. And the Fed actually, I have to give credit, because for a long time I was saying they were behind the curve. And maybe we'll see another quarter point, but I wouldn't be surprised if they keep the rates not much higher, because I'm starting to see the damage that it's doing. But here's the thing. They've been saying over and over repeatedly for so long, higher for longer. Now, I think it should have been a little higher sooner, or a little higher maybe now. But if they're going to stay with this rate for a long time, which I think is going to take to fight inflation, then the stock market may not go down a lot because it'll just resist the idea. So it could just be stagnant for years. And I just don't think has any reason to go up. Company earnings are going to be affected by these rising rates as companies refinance, as companies you won't get as many startups. And also you're going to have some money moving towards bonds. Let's say it's just a slow haul at high rates. Then more and more people might say, wait a minute, I've only gotten zero and maybe in the flat market. So they'll start saying, I'm going to go to a safer thing and make sure I get some income. Now, the other reasons why it's very likely to be a very long haul in terms of higher for longer, besides the fact the Fed has said it so many times, is unemployment remains at historic lows. To quote Barron's Weekly this Saturday, they said unemployment remains at near historic lows even after the Fed's aggressive rate hikes. It's obvious. I mean, the unemployment and energy are the keys. And here's the real big thing. I always say the bull in the China shop. We're in a very likely, almost certainly, hidden energy crisis with oil and gas companies. Oil and gas companies are putting in about 40% too little just to maintain oil and gas where it is. So imagine if that comes to fruition ultimately, because it takes 5 to 7 years to get oil and gas projects up. Oil and gas companies have been putting in less than 50% of what they normally put in since 2015, year after year of underinvesting. So at sooner or later, with demand, worldwide demand probably climbing due to developed countries' needs, developing countries and developed countries are still using oil, but also developing countries are using more and more, then where is that oil coming from when the oil companies are saying, no, we're not investing more? They're not investing more for so many reasons, but one is the U.S. administration and many other countries in Europe and other countries around the world, they're saying, well, we don't really want oil and gas in the future, so they're discouraging it. There's over 100 regulations and barriers that the Biden administration has put up to oil and gas production and in other countries. But the thing is, you're getting rid of nuclear in many countries like Germany and Japan. So what happens? It's not good for the environment because in the end, more coal than ever is being burned. So whether you're on the side of the environmentalists, which I understand, they're concerned about global warming, or those who are concerned about the economy, this is the craziest policy, aside from a few other crazy policies around the world. But this is one of the craziest, makes no sense policies that you could imagine. Nobody could believe it if you really dig into it. So oil and gas prices could go higher, they could go much higher, but I don't see demand going down a lot. Even if we hit a moderate recession or even a recession, which will drive stocks down, maybe oil and gas demand will go down a little bit worldwide or a bit, but what happens when the production can't meet even that demand? So oil and gas is the place to be, as we've always said, in terms of investments, and it's been the best performer. So quote of the week, and this relates. These are two quotes from oil executives. See, they know, but everybody else seems to be ignoring the issue, especially the governments around the world. But so this is one from Chuck Duginski, who is the CEO of shale driller in Oklahoma called Canvas Energy. Quote, the Biden administration is waging a war against oil that makes it far more difficult to invest in drilling that would boost production and bring down prices. Harold Hamm, who was pretty well known, founder of Continental Resources, said the Biden administration was more focused on, quote, putting us out of business than on bringing down high gas prices. But the thing is, and the other countries, by the way, in Europe and so many other countries are doing the same. What happens? Well, oil and gas again and is being used less because we don't have enough. So they use coal. Coal demand worldwide is up. Also, crazy policies discourage manufacturing, for instance, in the United States in many ways. So what's happening? China and India are producing so much carbon that they're becoming more dominant in the carbon emissions business, businesses. And so they every year are producing more and more. So we're just shifting the production to coal in India, coal in China. Great strategy, really geniuses. Okay. So sorry, I get a little frustrated at this, but you think somebody somewhere would figure this stuff out. Okay. 5 most interesting stories of the week. Number 1, another story that when I said crazy policies, there's a couple areas, but this is another one. So a record 260,000 migrants who were reported, by the way, because a lot aren't, poured into the U.S. in the month, a record. And early this month, 9,100 migrants crossed from Mexico to Arizona in a single day. Now, suddenly becoming more of a Democrat issue in many of the Democratic cities. Here's what, and so in a single day last week, 800 migrants arrived in New York City. Here's what Mayor Adams said, quote, New Yorkers are going to start to see visibly what being out of room means. We are out of room. Last week or two, I talked about Mayor Adams, who said we're going to have to cut our budgets across the board 5%, which is a ton in a New York City, and likely, very possibly 15%. They're big cuts for a city that's not used to that. So all of that I did prepared yesterday. Today, I read the story that yesterday, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said there is quote, an acute and immediate need to waive dozens of federal laws in order to build a border wall in South Texas. Now, a couple of points. One, the Biden administration, Kamala Harris, everybody has been saying the border is, quote, secure. Everything's under control, no problem. But it's getting so out of control that a lot of Democratic City and a lot of Democrats are worrying about the election because we're coming into 24. So the problem is, I fear this is window dressing. Number one, if they were really concerned, why would they right now be suing Texas because they're putting up buoys in the Rio Grande to prevent Texas from fighting it? Why would they cut barbed wire in Texas for their own reasons? And so they're doing everything in the world. And plus, they're talking about building 20 miles of wall, not, for instance, the 450 miles of wall that was built under the Trump administration. So walls work. They work everywhere. They work around your home. They work around, around every country in the world. And I'm not against immigration. Again, I think we should have an intelligent immigration policy like just about every country in the world. Canada, for instance, very perfect example. You can't just get into Canada if you're going to be a burden on their society. Maybe they let some people in who are a burden, but they calculate, okay, that's fine. We want a lot of productive people too. And especially we don't want terrorists. And we know, I think it was 250 terrorists they found already crossing the border. And who knows how many are in here. And that could disrupt American society. And maybe that's another reason why they're concerned now, because they're starting to suspect that something might happen and it won't be good for politics. Number two, another interesting story of the week too. In Britain, the Department of Education has now recommended that school principals prohibit phone use. So researchers in the government of Britain found that 29% of secondary school students said they use phones in most or all of their classes. I'll repeat that. 29% of secondary school students are saying they're using phones in most or all of their classes. That's a lot of students who aren't paying attention. England is now joining Portugal, Italy, and France, which have already moved to ban phones in classrooms. It's very obvious. The U.S. should do the same. Every state, every country, every government agency should be pushing, that has any power over this, like the Department of Education should be pushing, saying that's it. Kids can carry phones for emergencies, but we're not going to have them, in a classroom at all. Maybe you check them in the locker or whatever, or maybe get rid of them, whatever it is. They're hurting our education system, and it's bad enough as it is. Number three. So a progressive Democrat, and this was a pretty well covered story, but it depends on your news sources, because I know half the news sources will watch Fox Business or Fox News, and they get a lot of news that won't be covered or mentioned at all on a lot of other sources. It's just the way the news is these days. They, especially the mainstream media, they just don't report on things they don't like. So a progressive Democrat pulled a fire alarm during a Republican vote on the budget. And he then claims now that he pulled the fire alarm because he thought it was a door. Now, here is a picture of the fire alarm. This does not look like a door. It says fire alarm, push down, pull down, notifier. And by the way, this representative, Progressive Squad Democrat, was formerly a principal of a school. So you would think he knows what a fire alarm is. He may or may not get expelled. My last point is, I don't know why the Progressive Democrats get to be called Progressive Democrats, because they're really socialists. They've hurt not on the country with pro-crime policies, pro-open border policies, and so many other areas, but also they're really hurting the Democratic Party. The majority of Democrats, and some of them are migrating away, but a lot of Democrats just can't believe their own party now, the moderate side. So maybe there's 20 or 30% of people in the country who are agreeing with these people, but okay, they're socialist Democrats, and they really don't understand history. Number 4, interesting story. Another interesting story. There were a lot of really interesting stories this week. The Biden administration is now issuing restrictions on gas furnaces. So the Department of Energy just finalized regulations that said that gas furnaces must achieve a 95% efficiency rating in terms of heat. So it's a bit good for the environment because they'll be, more efficient that way. The problem, first of all, and by the way, they require what's called non-condensing gas furnaces, if you want to look it up, because right now 60% of current residential gas furnaces are the other kind, condensing. So the problems with this, according to the American Gas Association, a condensing furnace costs $350 more to buy, but it adds $2,200 in installation costs. And so a lot of Americans, when their furnaces go, are going to have to pay about $2,500 more to convert. Another problem with this plan is that some people are going to say, I cannot afford all that cost for a gas furnace plus the extra $2,500, and they might switch back to electric heat. And that's very energy inefficient and poor for everything, including the environment. So again, wow, really brilliant. And again, it's not helping at all because the United States is reducing carbon emission while other countries are increasing it because they're brilliant theories. And one last pretty well covered story. I don't know how well it covered it is, but probably all over. But I always like to end with a fun story. So Taylor Swift is dating Travis Kelce. I think it's pretty established. But what's interesting is, so when she showed up at the Jets game last Sunday, prices for a while almost doubled, and average tickets jumped ultimately from $428 to $627 because people want to see Taylor Swift to see her. She is hot in terms of the entertainment business, obviously. But and I at the time I thought, well, maybe she'd just be in the booth, but she was on the field. I watched for a few minutes, and so people got their extra, prices value. Anyway, we'll take a quick advertisement, and then we'll be back to the dividend, in this case, read of the week, which I think is really interesting. And then we'll talk about the panel discussion of the week. See you soon. Or we'll keep going. Technical glitch. We don't really need the ad, so I'll just keep going. Sorry about that, audience. So we're going to skip the ad now. What to do. So every week I always say this, but it's clearer and clearer that the Wall Street hacker strategies make sense. Number 1, own energy. It's been the best performing sector for the last year and a half. And you have to own energy some energy, at least in this environment, because it looks like energy could be driving inflation and also hurting other investments for a long time. So you need it as a hedge. Number 2, own dividend stocks. We always put up the chart, but not the last 2 weeks. So we have a chart that shows that over 50 years, dividend stocks doubled the performance of the S&P 500. $1,000 put into into I think it was $100. Sorry, I'm not even going into the numbers. Anyway, it was a huge increase for the S&P 500 over 50 years. I believe it was 100 went to 4,000. But the thing is, if you were in dividend stocks, 100 went to 8,000. And if you were into dividend growers and initiators, it went to 12,000. So everybody should have a different allocation to stocks, but whatever it is, you should have most or all of your stock investments in, aside from energy, in dividend stocks. Ideally, a lot of dividend energy stocks, which is where I am. And so the read of the week, I usually been talking a lot about energy, and it's hard in this environment. I'm finding little tiny pieces, but this was a kind of big move. So first, the disclaimers. This is for entertainment only. There's never a guarantee. Nobody can guarantee anything except for a fixed income like a CD, and even that's can't guarantee against inflation. It's only my opinion and the opinion of Wall Street hackers, and you should consult your financial advisor. So that said, I really liked SRTF at 10, and I recommended it at 10, and now it's much lower, and I have no problem with it. Normally, if a stock goes down, I get concerned. But this, to me, seems like one of the safest stocks, and I'll explain why. And now with an even bigger yield. So I brought it back to 8%. It dropped to maybe 6% of my portfolio. I said, I feel good enough about this. And by the way, if you exclude energy, this is really my only big investment other than energy and bonds and cash, because I don't like the way the other, generally it's hard to find stocks that are going to move well, although I will have further recommendations in the non-energy space. So I hold SRTF, which is Slate Grocery REIT, in my IRA, and it should be held generally whenever possible in an IRA or profit sharing plan. Why? Unless you live in Canada, then I guess anywhere. But for instance, in the United States and other countries, I believe there's a withholding tax of 15% in Canada. So you kind of get doubly hit because let's say you get a dividend, not only do you have to pay tax in your country, but you get to have to pay another 15%. And I don't think most people can't deduct that 15%. It's very complicated. So you don't want to have to pay taxes and taxes and taxes on that 15%. So bottom line, much better in an IRA or a 401k or profit sharing plan type thing. And that's where I hold it. So, but what do I love about it? First of all, it's open air shopping centers, which I felt for a long time are the place to be. They're more convenient and people need to go to them for, their community needs. Number two, this one is 100% grocery anchored. So most REITs, even that have groceries, aren't 100%. Number three, it has about now an 11% dividend. So especially if it's in an IRA, but anywhere, that's a phenomenal rate of dividends. And it's covering its dividend with its cash flow. Number four, reason the majority of its shopping centers are in the southern U.S., and that's where demographics show so much growth. And occupancy is 93%, which is phenomenal for a shopping center REIT, again, because people want to be near the groceries. Its price is around $7.75 today. The average analyst had it at $10.83. So there's some potential appreciation. Sooner or later, the market's going to figure this is value. And it seems to me to be the safest by far non-energy investment you can make because of the high dividend. Let's say, I don't think so, but let's say inflation goes through the roof or oil goes through the roof. Well, maybe in a worst case scenario, which I don't think that'll happen there, you have to reduce their 11% dividend to 7%. Okay, I'll take that too. But I don't think they're going to because it costs so much now to build a new shopping center. So they basically have a niche. There's not a lot of new shopping centers going around the country or around the world because construction costs are so high. So I really love SRTF for some of your investing. Okay, panel discussion of the week. The question is, where are rates going in the longer term? Hi, Kim. So last week we discussed where rates are going in the short term. And my thinking is maybe a little higher now, but they're not coming down for a long time. And they're going to cause pain because it's probably necessary, the pain, in order to adjust the market and inflation, and maybe for a really long time. I wouldn't be surprised. But where are rates going in the long term? So first, some background. The key Wall Street hacker theory is that they're heading to zero. And that's one of our biggest theories that I push and that I believe in. But I'm not sure. And, I don't know what Kim will say. And, is it 100%? I don't know. I think it's near it, but maybe Kim will say no, may not. Why? Number one, many forecasters accept that high government deficits are going to lead to increased inflation and therefore very high rates. And pretty much everybody says, oh, the deficit is going to drive inflation up. Yes, it will drive inflation up, but I don't think it's going to drive rates up. That's my theory. My theory is the opposite. It's phenomenal. Another topic that isn't discussed enough, it does discuss in general, but so the official U.S. deficit is 33 trillion. But the problem is the unfunded liabilities, basically for Medicare and Social Security, not free, but largely free, healthcare and pensions, for people in Social Security, have been estimated, and they could easily be 150 trillion, 200 trillion, or 250 trillion. So everybody's worrying about 33 trillion. Well, what about the 200 trillion? Now, I've read, I don't know if that's true, but I think it's quite possible that one of those numbers, 150 or 200 trillion or something, is more money than all privately held stocks, bonds, and real estate in the country. That's a lot of debt. Now, footnote, I always have to mention this. It's not better in the rest of the world. So you say, oh, only the United States has a crisis. Well, in India, in China, in Europe, they're all offering free healthcare. So it's even worse in a lot of ways because they are not funding for aging demographics. But as people are aging, they're not funding their pensions well. So you're going to have crisis all over the world. So it's not, I'll go to another country and, flee there. I think they're going to have some bigger problems in many of those countries because of worse demographics. So it's not just the U.S. So what's going to happen, I believe, is the U.S. and other countries have no way to pay down the debt. But they also don't have a way that they're going to want to pay interest on it and double the debt again over time, compounding. So what they're going to do is do what they've done a couple of times in the past. They're going to use what's called yield curve control. It's been used in Japan for well over a decade to keep rates near zero and even negative. And the United States already done it in World War II. They also brought rates extremely low. And they can use yield curve control down to bring rates to zero, near zero, or even negative. So what yield curve control is, you can look it up, is basically the government says any interest rate on a bond over a certain amount, we'll just buy it back. So they issue the bond themselves, they finance the government, and then they just buy it back at another department. They're already doing this a lot from the U.S. Treasury now. The Fed buys the stuff the U.S. prints, and they already own, I think, a third or whatever of the mortgages. So it's just like a printing machine, but they put the money back. But the problem is, this is not good for the economy in so many ways. And the other thing is, and this is for those technical charts, people. So you look at, for the 40 years since the 80s, the yields on the 10-year and the 30-year have been going down almost in a straight line, almost perfectly, until 2020. Then with COVID, it dropped a lot because of the crisis. Now, because of the aftermath of COVID and plus the crazy energy prices, policies and whatever, it's jumped, high. But eventually, once it crushes the economy, very likely, unfortunately, and inflation gets under control, they're going to bring the rates back down because the economy will be slowing again. So once they get the economy slowing and inflation slowing, it's going to go back down. Now, if you take that chart up for 40 years and just go further out on that straight line, we're looking at hitting about zero in 7 years. So whether you're fundamental and look at what the government's going to need to do or technical, I'm 95% sure that we're heading for zero rates. Now, I'm not 100. Kim, we have to hurry because we have 5 minutes, but what do you think? Am I right, or is it almost certain, or do you think inflation could get out of control, which it could, and then rates will go super high and the deficit will even expand more?
Well, I always take a look at, you're great with charts and numbers and watching where they go and come. But what I look at, especially when there are crimes involved or, just circumstances, I always follow the dollar and I ask myself, who benefits? Whether it goes up or down, right? Who benefits? Mm-hmm. Also, who does not benefit, and how does this impact us as a whole? And what because who this benefits was definitely interesting to me, because unsurprisingly, to the people who know that this benefits, it's your bond buyers, your lenders, and your savers. They all benefit from a higher rate, and especially in the early days. The bond yields in particular typically move higher even before the feds raise the rates. And then bond investors can earn more without taking out any additional risk. So I look at that and I go, oh, okay. So I think the rates are going to go high because the people who own the bonds are, mostly belong to the Fed. Now, who does this hurt? Okay.
Wait, Kim, I just want to specify. So you're saying even in the long term, like in 5 years and 7 years, you think rates will stay high?
I think they are, because, Janet Yellen kind of hurt us the other day when she opened her mouth and said that they need to go higher. Janet Yellen made.
But is that short term or long term?
She was saying now I didn't listen to the whole thing. So I'm bad about that. I was in a hurry, but the fact that she even opened her mouth and said they needed to go higher. And then I asked myself, who does this hurt? Well, this hurts the hardworking middle-class American who maybe had a variable interest rate, and it's,
it's watering the real estate market.
Right. Also, people who are just coming out and starting in their life, like, graduates, they can't get a loan because the interest rate is high.
About that too.
And also if their loans aren't adjusted properly and locked in, their rates go up and down too. A lot of people don't know that. So I think that this is all intended to make the rich man richer.
It could be.
Yeah, I do. And I think that, you had mentioned something else that was very interesting to me that kind of hones in on what's going on. And my theory is, again, you're talking about the natural gas and gas prices and energy. And when these energy prices happen the way they are and the costs go up, this also hurts the families in poverty and the families that are trying to make it. So I truly believe that all of this is intended for the rich man to lock down his riches.
Let me jump in. You're right. Absolutely. You make a good point.
There was over $800 billion issued in PPP loans that don't have to pay back. So you don't tell me that didn't hurt our economy and cause us to bleed out completely. $800 billion. Sure. And these rich men got those loans, and now they could turn around and buy more bonds.
Wait. But Kim, I have to give a conclusion because we're almost at time. But you know what? You raised a good point, especially in the fact that it depends how long the energy crisis lasts. But if this could last longer than 3 or 5, it could be at least 3 or 5 years that rates are going to keep going up because inflation, energy drives inflation. Like in the 70s, it was like 14%. And you know what? Who knows how bad it is? That's why. So my bottom line is
the gap was here between poverty.
I'm going to conclude. We've got a minute left. Okay.
Right. And here.
Okay. So the thing is, my final conclusion. One, I think rates are probably going to zero, but maybe Kim's right. It may be more of a loop, like where we go up for a longer time. It'll hurt companies, but especially help energy companies. But in the end, I think we have to go to zero because they can't compound these numbers. I believe it's inevitable. But the other side is, if you're an investor, you have to decide where things are going. Because if rates are going to zero, then it's important that's my philosophy, and I just keep wanting to do it. You want to lock in income, you want to lock in dividends, lock in rates. Even if they're going higher, then I'll just take the dividends and reinvest at higher rates. But sooner or later, and you have to own some energy. I mean, you have to. So that's it. Unfortunately, we're out of time. As Kim always says, get healthy and get wealthy. My favorite saying, one of my favorite sayings of all time. And we will see you next week. Thanks, Kim. See you soon. Have a good week.
Have a great time, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Crap.
Are we coming off?
My internet runs. We'll cut this part out. Don't worry about it.
You got it. Okay, good.
Yeah, our buddy Mark.
One of the things that business owners forget a lot is to prepare for their own retirement.
Hi, my name's Nick Palavita, and today I'm with a very